Sirens weren't flashing yet, but the tension in the cold marble lobby was already thick enough to choke on. A multi-millionaire CEO stood with his hands raised, facing an officer who had already unclipped his handcuffs. Racism, power, and a catastrophic mistake were about to collide spectacularly. Rain lashed heavily against the floor-to-ceiling glass panes of the Zenith Tower in downtown Chicago. It was a miserable, freezing Sunday morning at 2 a.m., the kind of hour where the city finally surrendered to silence. Inside the sprawling, impeccably lit lobby, the atmosphere was a sterile mix of brushed steel and imported Italian marble. Nathaniel Rhodes just wanted to grab a folder and go home. Nathaniel was 39, the sole founder and chief executive officer of Rhodes Horizon, one of the most successful venture capital firms in the Midwest. He had just landed at O'Hare after a grueling 14-hour flight from Tokyo, where he had spent the last week negotiating a complex tech acquisition. Jet lag pulled at his eyes, and a dull ache settled in his lower back. Wanting nothing more than a hot shower and his own bed, he had made a detour to the office. He needed the hard copy contracts locked in his private safe before Monday morning's board meeting. Because it was the middle of the night, Nathaniel had completely foregone his usual bespoke Tom Ford suits. He wore a faded grey Georgetown University hoodie, a pair of worn-in dark denim jeans, and comfortable white sneakers. His carry-on bag was slung over one shoulder. To anyone passing by on the street, he looked like a tired graduate student or a night shift courier. To the building's overnight security detail, he apparently looked like a threat. Nathaniel walked past the empty main reception desk, his sneakers squeaking faintly on the polished floor. He bypassed the standard employee elevators and headed straight for the secluded alcove housing the executive lifts, the ones requiring a black-tier biometric keycard to even call the car. He had just unzipped his duffel bag to fish out his wallet when a sharp, authoritative voice echoed through the cavernous lobby. "Hey, you! Step away from the glass!" Nathaniel paused, his hand still inside his bag. He turned slowly to see a uniformed police officer striding purposefully across the lobby floor. The officer's hand was resting aggressively on his utility belt, right next to his radio. His posture was rigid, chest puffed out in a classic display of aggressive authority. "I said step away from the elevator," the officer snapped, closing the distance. His name tag read B. Walsh. Officer Bradley Walsh was working an off-duty security detail for the building, a common arrangement for city cops looking for extra overtime pay. He was a stocky man with a tight buzz cut and a perpetual scowl that suggested he viewed the world exclusively as a series of potential violations. Nathaniel pulled his hand out of his bag, holding his leather wallet. He kept his movements deliberately slow and visible. "Evening, officer," Nathaniel said, his voice calm, pitched in the low, resonant baritone that usually commanded boardrooms without him ever having to raise it. "I'm just heading up to my office to grab some files. I'll be out of your hair in 10 minutes. Officer Walsh stopped a few feet away, his eyes raking over Nathaniel's casual attire, lingering with obvious disdain on the faded hoodie. His lips curled into a skeptical sneer. "Your office? Right. Look, buddy, I don't know how you slipped past the exterior doors, but the loading dock is closed and deliveries don't come through the front. It's 2 in the morning. "I'm not a delivery driver," Nathaniel replied, maintaining his polite tone. He knew exactly what was happening. He had lived as a black man in America long enough to recognize the sudden, sharp shift in the air, the instantaneous presumption of guilt. "I work here. I'm going up to the 60th floor." Walsh let out a harsh, disbelieving laugh. "The 60th floor? You've got to be kidding me. That's the penthouse suite. Rhodes Horizon. That whole floor belongs to the investment firm. I am well aware of who occupies the floor," Nathaniel said quietly. He opened his wallet and pulled out his black tier keycard, holding it up. "If you'll just let me scan this, I'll be on my way." Walsh's hand shot out, snatching the keycard from Nathaniel's fingers with unnecessary force. The officer examined the sleek, unmarked black card, his frown deepening. "Where did you get this?" "This is an executive master pass. I got it from the building administration when I leased the floor," Nathaniel explained, his patience beginning to fray at the edges, though his face remained a mask of stoic composure. "Cut the crap," Walsh growled, his voice dropping to a menacing register. He unclipped his radio. "You expect me to believe a guy dressed like a street thug belongs in a multi-million-dollar executive suite? You either stole this card or you found it dropped on the street. Now I need your government ID right now, and keep your hands where I can see them." Nathaniel sighed, a slow, weary sound. He reached into his wallet again and extracted his Illinois driver's license. He handed it over. Walsh snatched it, shining his heavy tactical flashlight directly onto the plastic, and then, deliberately, flashed the blinding beam right into Nathaniel's eyes. Nathaniel didn't flinch. He just stared back through the harsh light. "Nathaniel Rhodes." Walsh read the name aloud, mispronouncing the last name slightly. He looked at the address. It was a sprawling estate in the affluent suburb of Lake Forest. Walsh snorted. "Lake Forest? Yeah, okay. A fake ID to go with the stolen keycard. You guys are getting bold, I'll give you that." "Officer Walsh," Nathaniel said, his voice dropping a fraction of an octave, losing the polite deference and adopting the cold, absolute authority he reserved for hostile negotiations. "That is my real ID, that is my real address, and this is my building. Now, you can either call the building manager, Sarah Higgins, and ask her to verify who I am, or you can give me my property back and step aside." Walsh's face flushed a deep, angry red. He hated being spoken to with authority, especially by someone he had already categorized as a criminal. He dropped the flashlight down, his other hand instinctively drifting toward his handcuffs. "You don't give me orders, boy. You're trespassing in a restricted commercial property, in possession of stolen security credentials, and presenting forged identification. Turn around and put your hands flat against the marble wall." Now, the lobby was dead silent, save for the faint, rhythmic drumming of the rain against the exterior glass. Nathaniel did not move. He stood his ground, his eyes locked onto Officer Walsh. He had dealt with aggressive, small-minded men before, but usually across a mahogany table with millions of dollars on the line. The stakes here were different, visceral, and dangerously unpredictable. "I am not turning around, and I am not putting my hands on the wall," Nathaniel stated evenly. "If you lay a hand on me, Officer Walsh, I promise you, the ensuing legal and financial consequences will fundamentally alter the trajectory of your life." It was a bold statement, delivered with an icy calm that momentarily threw Walsh off balance. The officer hesitated, his hand hovering over his cuffs. Suspects usually yelled, ran, or complied out of fear. They rarely stood perfectly still and threatened him with litigation using perfect diction. But Walsh's ego quickly overtook his caution. He took a step forward, invading Nathaniel's personal space, his chest almost bumping into Nathaniel's shoulder. "Are you resisting arrest?" Walsh demanded, his voice thick with anticipation, almost hoping for a physical altercation to justify his next move. Nathaniel took a slow, deep breath. He realized that if he pushed back physically, or even raised his voice, Walsh would use it as an excuse to escalate to violence. He needed to dismantle this man's power trip completely, methodically, and undeniably. "No," Nathaniel said smoothly. "I am not resisting. In fact, I want to fully cooperate with your investigation into this alleged break-in." Walsh blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift in demeanor. "Excuse me? You think I stole this keycard to break into the Rhodes Horizon offices?" Nathaniel continued, his tone dangerously polite. "If it's stolen, the card's internal security chip will have been flagged by the system, and it won't call the elevator. Even if it does call the elevator, it won't bypass the secondary biometric scanner at the penthouse doors. Why don't we test your theory? Take me up. Escort me yourself. If the card doesn't work, or if the doors don't open, you can arrest me right there in the elevator." Walsh narrowed his eyes, his mind working through the proposal. He looked at the executive elevator bank, then back at Nathaniel. The cop's lips twisted into a cruel, triumphant smile. He thought Nathaniel was bluffing, trying to buy time or hoping the system was glitchy enough to let him escape. "You want to play games?" Walsh sneered, tossing the black keycard back at Nathaniel. It hit Nathaniel's chest and clattered to the floor. "Pick it up. Go ahead. Swipe it. But I'm warning you, the second that alarm trips, you're going face down on the floor, and I won't be gentle." Nathaniel calmly bent down, retrieved his keycard, and turned to the sleek, buttonless black panel beside the elevator doors. He tapped the card against the glass reader. A soft chime echoed through the alcove. The LED strip surrounding the elevator frame shifted from a solid, restrictive red to an inviting, luminous blue. Ding! The brushed steel doors slid silently open, revealing a luxurious, wood-paneled interior. Walsh's smug expression faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recovered. "Lucky break. Found a card they haven't deactivated yet. Get in." Nathaniel stepped into the elevator, moving to the back corner. Walsh followed closely, keeping his hand near his belt, his eyes darting around the confined space. Once the doors closed, Nathaniel reached out and pressed his thumb against a glowing biometric pad beneath the floor buttons. The scanner flashed green, and the elevator immediately began its rapid, silent ascent to the 60th floor. The ride took 45 seconds. The tension inside the car was suffocating. Walsh stood awkwardly, trying to maintain his intimidating posture, but the sheer opulence of the private elevator seemed to dwarf him. He stared at the digital floor indicator as the numbers climbed dizzyingly fast. 30, 40, 50. "You know, you people always think you're smarter than you are." Walsh broke the silence, his voice echoing slightly in the small space. "You think you can fast-talk your way into a high-end suite, grab some laptops, maybe some petty cash, and walk out? I've been working the downtown beat for 15 years. I know a scam when I see one." Nathaniel didn't look at him. He kept his eyes fixed on the doors. "Is that right? You people? Don't try to twist my words into some race thing," Walsh scoffed defensively. "I mean criminals, con artists." "We'll see who the con artist is in about 10 seconds, Nathaniel replied softly. Ding, floor 60, the penthouse. The heavy steel doors slid open. The view that greeted them was nothing short of breathtaking. The Rhodes Horizon reception area was a vast, open-concept space bathed in the warm glow of ambient lighting. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning, panoramic view of the Chicago skyline, rain streaking across the glass, distorting the city lights into a watercolor painting. Directly opposite the elevators, mounted on a massive slab of imported black marble, were the words Rhodes Horizon in brushed silver lettering. Walsh stepped out first, his flashlight drawn again, sweeping the empty, immaculate space. He was looking for shattered glass, overturned desks, any sign of forced entry. But everything was perfect. "All right," Walsh barked, turning back to Nathaniel, who was casually stepping out of the elevator. "Game's over. Put your hands on your head." Before Nathaniel could respond, a side door down the main hallway swung open. A man walked out, rubbing his eyes and carrying a stack of thick legal binders. It was Jonathan Hayes, the firm's chief legal counsel, and one of Nathaniel's oldest friends. Jonathan was a tall, sharply dressed man in his 50s, currently looking dishevelled from pulling an all-nighter finalising the Tokyo merger documents. Jonathan froze, staring at the bizarre scene in the lobby. His CEO, dressed in a faded hoodie, being held at flashlight point by an aggressive, red-faced cop. "Nathaniel," Jonathan said, his voice laced with absolute bewilderment. "What the hell is going on here?" Walsh whipped around, shining his flashlight at Jonathan. "Stay right there. Who are you? Are you with him?" Jonathan squinted against the glare, his shock quickly morphing into furious indignation. He dropped the binders onto a nearby glass table with a loud thud. "Get that damn light out of my face, officer. I am Jonathan Hayes, chief legal counsel for this firm, and you are currently pointing a weapon at the owner of this company." Walsh froze. The flashlight beam trembled slightly in his grip. He looked from Jonathan's tailored suit to Nathaniel's faded hoodie, the gears in his mind grinding to a violent, catastrophic halt. "Owner," Walsh managed to croak out, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. Nathaniel stepped fully into the light of the reception area, his posture straightening, his presence suddenly filling the massive room. The tired graduate student vanished, replaced entirely by the formidable titan of industry. "Yes, Officer Walsh," Nathaniel said, his voice echoing like a gavel striking wood. "Welcome to my office." Silence descended upon the 60th floor, heavier and far colder than the storm raging outside the panoramic windows. The flashlight in Officer Bradley Walsh's hand suddenly seemed to weigh 100 pounds. Its beam dipped, hitting the polished hardwood floor, reflecting a fractured, shaky circle of light. Colour drained entirely from Walsh's face, leaving behind a sickly, pale hue that clashed with the aggressive red flush from just moments before. He looked from Jonathan Hayes, standing rigidly by the legal binders, back to Nathaniel Rhodes. The faded grey Georgetown hoodie no longer looked like the uniform of a street-level trespasser. Framed by the staggering wealth of the penthouse suite, it now projected the untouchable, effortless confidence of a man who owned the building. "I was just following standard security protocols," Walsh stammered, the menacing gravel in his voice evaporating into a thin, defensive squeak. He instinctively took a half-step backward, finally unclipping his hand from his utility belt. He was uncooperative. He refused to explain his presence downstairs. Jonathan let out a sharp, humorless laugh that echoed off the imported marble walls. He adjusted his glasses, his exhaustion entirely replaced by a predatory legal focus. "Uncooperative? Officer, I have known Nathaniel for 20 years. He is physically incapable of raising his voice unless he is closing a merger. Do not stand in our headquarters and lie to my face. What is your badge number?" "Now hold on a minute, sir." Walsh tried to recover a shred of his shattered authority, puffing his chest out marginally. "It's 2 in the morning. Your CEO comes walking in off the street looking looking the way he does. No suit, carrying a duffel bag. You can't blame a guy for doing his job." "Your job," Nathaniel interjected, his voice slicing through the room with glacial precision, "is to secure the premises, not to racially profile the tenants, confiscate private property without cause, and threaten physical violence." "You did not ask for clarification, Officer Walsh. You demanded my identification, called it a forgery, claimed my biometric keycard was stolen, and threatened to throw me face down on the lobby floor." Walsh swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "I didn't mean it like that. I was establishing command presence. It's police training. It wasn't about race. It is always about command presence until you realize you are commanding the wrong person." Nathaniel replied evenly. He walked past Walsh, completely ignoring the officer's proximity, and moved toward the sprawling mahogany reception desk. He tapped a sleek touchscreen panel embedded in the wood. The massive floor-to-ceiling glass wall behind the desk instantly transitioned from opaque to transparent, revealing a massive, dimly lit boardroom. "Jonathan," Nathaniel said, not looking back. "Call Sarah Higgins, wake her up, tell her to get down here immediately. Then call the central precinct. Ask for the watch commander. Inform them that an off-duty officer working a private security detail is currently detaining the owner of Rhodes Horizon under threat of arrest." "I am not detaining you," Walsh blurted out, panic finally breaking through his stubborn ego. "Look, Mr. Rhodes, there's been a misunderstanding, a huge misunderstanding. I apologize. Let's just chalk this up to a late-night security mix-up, all right? I'll head back down to the lobby. You guys do your work." Walsh turned towards the elevator, desperate to escape the suffocating pressure of the room. "Stop right there," Jonathan barked, stepping into Walsh's path. The lawyer was an inch taller than the cop, and right now he radiated absolute fury. "You are not leaving this floor. You initiated an unlawful detainment downstairs, and you escalated it by forcing my client into a confined elevator under duress. If you step into that elevator, I will personally ensure you are charged with kidnapping and false imprisonment by sunrise." "Kidnapping? Are you out of your mind?" Walsh scoffed, though his eyes darted nervously toward the exit. "He agreed to come up here. I offered to prove my identity because you threatened to assault me if I didn't," Nathaniel corrected him quietly, leaning against the reception desk. "There is a distinct legal difference, officer. One I am sure the Internal Affairs Bureau will be fascinated to explore." Walsh glared at them, breathing heavily, realizing he was entirely trapped. "You have no proof of what happened downstairs. It's your word against mine. My body camera is charging in the security office. I was off duty." A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of Nathaniel's mouth. It was not a smile of joy, but the cold satisfaction of a trap snapping shut. "You assume," Nathaniel said, tapping the touchscreen on the desk once more, "that because I am dressed casually, I am careless. Zenith Tower is a Class A commercial property, but Rhodes Horizon handles highly classified intellectual property and sovereign wealth funds. We don't rely on the building's lobby cameras." A massive 80-inch flat screen on the waiting area wall suddenly flickered to life. It displayed a grid of high-definition camera feeds. Nathaniel tapped a button, and the screen maximized a feed, showing the exact alcove of the executive elevators downstairs. The footage was pristine, 4K resolution, and most importantly, it had a small, pulsing audio waveform at the bottom. "Microphones?" Walsh whispered, his face draining of whatever color had managed to return. "Military-grade, directional audio," Jonathan confirmed, crossing his arms. "Legally installed, explicitly detailed in the building's lease agreement, and currently storing every word you said to Mr. Rhodes on an encrypted off-site server. We have your threats, your slurs, and your unprovoked aggression in flawless high definition." Walsh stared at the screen, watching his own aggressive posture, hearing his own voice echo through the penthouse speakers. "You expect me to believe a guy dressed like a street thug belongs in a multi-million-dollar executive suite?" The reality of his situation crashed down upon him. He hadn't just insulted a rich man. He had handed a flawless, undeniable civil rights lawsuit to a billionaire who had his own legal department. 45 minutes later, the atmosphere in the penthouse boardroom was suffocatingly tense. The storm outside continued to batter the glass, but inside, a different kind of tempest was reaching its climax. Captain Thomas Miller, a 20-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department, with silver hair and a deeply lined face, sat at the head of the massive mahogany table. Beside him sat Sarah Higgins, the general manager of Zenith Tower, who had arrived wearing a hastily thrown-on trench coat over her pajamas, looking utterly horrified. Officer Walsh stood rigidly at attention near the doorway, stripped of his usual swagger, looking like a scolded child. Nathaniel sat opposite the captain, a steaming cup of black coffee in his hands. Jonathan Hayes stood firmly behind Nathaniel's chair, holding a tablet that had just finished playing the lobby security footage for the third time. The silence that followed the end of the video was deafening. Captain Miller rubbed his temples, letting out a long, exhausted sigh. He looked at Walsh, his eyes filled with a mixture of disgust and deep disappointment. "Walsh," Captain Miller started, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "You have been on my roster for 5 years. We have had multiple seminars, multiple briefings on de-escalation, bias training, and community relations. And yet, I am sitting here watching you treat a prominent citizen like a vagrant because he happened to be wearing a sweatshirt. Captain, he was lurking by the private elevators at 2 a.m., Walsh pleaded, though his voice lacked conviction. I asked for his ID, and he handed me a license for a Lake Forest estate. It didn't add up." "It didn't add up to you?" Sarah Higgins interrupted, her voice shaking with anger. "Mr. Rhodes pays over $2 million a year to lease this space. He is the anchor tenant of my building. You were hired to protect this property, not to terrorize the people who own it. Zenith Tower is terminating our off-duty contract with you, effective immediately. You are permanently banned from this premises." Walsh flinched, as if physically struck. Losing the Zenith Tower contract meant losing thousands of dollars in easy overtime. "That's just the beginning, Bradley," Captain Miller said grimly. He stood up, towering over the disgraced officer. "Hand over your badge and your service weapon, right now." Walsh's eyes widened in sheer panic. "Captain, please, I'll apologize. I'll take a suspension. Don't strip my badge. You escalated a non-violent encounter based entirely on your own prejudice, threatened physical assault without provocation, and unlawfully detained a civilian." Miller listed the offences with mechanical coldness. "You are stripped of police powers pending a full internal affairs investigation. Gun, badge, now." With trembling hands, Walsh unclipped his heavy leather belt, placing his firearm on the boardroom table. He unpinned his silver star and set it next to the gun. The metallic clink echoed loudly in the quiet room. "Wait in my cruiser downstairs," Miller ordered. "Do not speak to anyone. Do not touch your phone." Walsh looked at Nathaniel one last time. There was no apology in his eyes, only the bitter, resentful glare of a man blaming the world for his own catastrophic mistakes. Without another word, he turned and walked out, the heavy glass doors swinging shut behind him. Captain Miller turned back to Nathaniel, his posture softening slightly. "Mr. Rhodes, on behalf of the department, I am profoundly sorry. This is not the standard we uphold. If you choose to pursue formal civil charges, you will face no friction from my precinct. We will provide any documentation your legal team requires." "Thank you, Captain," Nathaniel said softly, placing his coffee cup down. "Jonathan will be in touch with the city's legal department by tomorrow afternoon. We will be pursuing this to the fullest extent of the law, not for a payout, but to ensure that man never wears a badge in this city again." Miller nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the promise. "I don't blame you, sir. Have a good night, considering." The captain gathered Walsh's weapon and badge, escorting a visibly shaken Sarah Higgins out of the suite. When the doors finally closed, leaving just Nathaniel and Jonathan alone in the sprawling office, the silence returned, thick and exhausting. Jonathan placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Are you all right, Nate?" Nathaniel looked down at his faded grey hoodie, tracing the worn fabric near the pocket. He had built an empire from nothing. He commanded boardrooms, moved markets, and employed thousands. Yet, in the eyes of a man with a badge and a bias, all of his achievements, his wealth, and his character were entirely invisible, eclipsed by the color of his skin and the casual clothes on his back. "I'm fine, John," Nathaniel whispered, though his jaw remained tightly clenched. "I just came here to get my files." He stood up, walking past the breathtaking view of the Chicago skyline, heading toward the private safe in his inner office. The storm outside was finally beginning to break, but Nathaniel knew all too well that some storms, the quiet, insidious ones built on prejudice and assumptions, never truly passed. They just waited in the lobby. Did this story of power, prejudice, and instant karma keep you on the edge of your seat? Real power doesn't need to shout, and true character is revealed when the masks fall away. If you loved this dramatic twist and want more intense, real